Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood podcast. I have Joe with me as Greg, as always, here to talk about some college basketball as we go along with this crazy, wild regular season. And all we can do is hope that March will be the same. Greg, how you doing?
I'm good. My wife's pretty bummed because we were out last night, not doing anything fun in particular. We were at uh, a memorial for a friend's grandparent, but she had the UD game on, and she was very sad that UD lost to Richmond. So our household, we're not doing well over here, and she just found out this morning she has COVID. So it's going great. I had it a couple weeks ago, so I don't believe I'll be getting it, but it's fantastic over here right now.
Yeah, it seems like it. Well, at least you got college basketball going well as a whole this season. Not Dayton, but as a whole. Dayton is in the season too, but the one thing we got to start off with before we get to our recap, Greg, is something we had talked about during the week. I think Brandon Ramsey of KSR tweeted this out and saying that I think this was as of like Thursday night, 38% of top 10 teams, or excuse me, yeah, top 10 teams were winning 38% of their games on the road against unranked teams. It just adds to this crazy season where, this you don't know what's going to happen week in, week out, night in, night out. What's your take on it? Why do you think it's all changing? Why is this so much harder to win? And 4 years ago, it was 77% was this number.
Yeah, that's a wild stat, but this is one of those where I feel like the stat kind of like matches what we're seeing. Like I feel like we've you have these conversations where you're like, man, it feels like a crazier year than it's ever been, but like now it's like looking at that stat, yeah, it's a crazier year than we've ever seen. I mean, you just think between you could just do a laundry list of these losses that we've seen, and we just keep saying, oh well, everybody get whatever, oh this is just conference play and such conference, and this doesn't even count. Joe, I think you mentioned this stat came up on Thursday. This doesn't even count one of the games that we'll talk about. That was Auburn dropped a game on the road to, I believe it was Mississippi State. So you know I don't know that I have like to pull out of my like the hey Joe, this is the golden scroll. This tells us exactly why this. I just think it's a multitude of variables. I mean, you can some maybe way heavier than others. We've had a lot of coaching changes. A lot of our stalwart kind of staunch, strong coaches have left the sport. NIL. You could say it does this for this team and that for that team. You could talk about how that's mess with the playing field. There's just the transfer portal. There's just so many factors. I don't think if anyone's out there saying, I have it, I have the answer, I know exactly what's causing this, don't listen to them, because it's probably a lot of different things that have all happened in this sport within the last couple of years. Like I talked, I just said there's just been a lot of changes, and I just think it's created some chaos.
I'm with you on that. There are a couple reasons I'll highlight too. I think transfer portal is a big one. You don't have guys playing together as often, and it does, even if they practice together all these hours, it is playing together for years on years and learning tendencies and knowing what players are good at, knowing what someone's going to do is huge. Greg, we play basketball together for how many years now? I mean, not in the last couple, but for how many years? I knew exactly how you like to catch the ball, where to get you the ball, where not to pass you the ball, where you were going to be on defense, what you were doing. I could make jokes and say you didn't run inside the 3-point line like we usually do, but yeah, I basically knew where you were going to be, and that only comes from playing with you. These kids don't have that anymore because they every year it's different. Like, and that was always kind of the same, but maybe it was like, hey, we'll fit 2 or 3 freshmen into this rotation and maybe a transfer, and now it's all different. And then also, I do think maybe this might be like the worst talent level college basketball has ever had in terms of maybe stars and maybe this recruiting class too. So we look at like, Kentucky's freshmen are playing pretty well, but like there are some issues with them. We talk about Duke's freshmen still like stepping up, but like very sporadically. USC with Isaiah Collier just took another loss last night to UCLA. It's not the talent level isn't there. There are 6-year seniors, which is kind of cool, but I don't think the talent level's there.
The only thing I want to go into or just recall, kind of do a callback to, is I do remember, and it wasn't just you that said this. I feel like the words you said is, this was very early in the season. We were lied to about this freshman class, and I felt the same way. Mm-hmm. This is not like, hey, Joe. No, I was the first game I watched Isaiah Collier. I was like, man, this kid's amazing, and it's just like I don't know what it is, but it seems like there's not a freshman that you can pick out there. Like you could say like, oh, Rob Dillingham is exciting, but there's not a freshman outside of maybe the one that comes to mind is Reed Shepard that's been consistent. But even he's had kind of his he's here and there. It's just it's a lack of consistency, not just from teams, but some of these players. Like
Mhm.
it's just weird. There's just so much going on.
Yeah, I do think the evolution of the game too. We have more good players everywhere. I thought the transfer portal would make it tough for some of the smaller schools to compete, but they're doing well. We talk about the Mountain West every week on this show, and they're doing well too. So it's not like these smaller or even mid tier conferences are going or suffering as much as we thought. So excited that this is all happening. Excited that we can have a sport where anything can happen on any given night. I do think maybe it's a little bit bad for the sport. Maybe that. We don't have a Kentucky 31-3 team or like a Memphis undefeated team like I talked about last week, or even if Purdue maybe had won a couple more of their games and like maybe one loss or undefeated to this point, like a dominant team usually makes it more fun for the casuals to watch and get involved. It is way more fun for people who are watching anyway. Like there's a lot of people who probably wouldn't watch Kentucky South Carolina, which will be the first game of recap, and I would get it. You see South Carolina unranked even though they're good, and you're like, why am I going to watch this on a Tuesday night? But for the most diehard college basketball fans, it's been awesome. That's the main point here. Let's just roll right into it, Greg. Kentucky got their butts kicked by South Carolina. Very bad game for, as you mentioned, Reed Shepard. This is one of the games you don't know what happened there. The ball was not moving for Kentucky players. The perimeter defense was awful. John Calipari gets his teams ready to go and tells them all the time, like, hey, you're getting every other team's best shot. You've Kentucky on the front of your jersey. You're a ranked team. They're going to play out of their minds. And South Carolina did. Lamont Paris is doing a fantastic job. Taylor Cooper had 20 points and 6 rebounds. They are now 17-3 after winning this weekend as well. Likely going to be in the AP poll when that comes out on Monday. But a very fantastic job by Lamont Paris. And Kentucky, this is one of the ones where you throw the game tape out. You just say, hey, we just need to start moving the ball and playing like Kentucky basketball, not worrying about what the defense is doing or who's in the rotation or any of that.
Yeah, I remember watching this South Carolina team when they played. I believe it was Mississippi State, and they won that game. And I said, I walked away from that game saying, man, that Mississippi State defense kind of, even though they lost the game, it left me, kind of feeling like, man, there's something to that. And I just kind of almost thought of this team as an afterthought. There's it's not just names on this team. There's we like Michi. I know we jokingly early in the year said, oh, we like his name or whatnot, but he looks like he's pretty good. Talon Cooper's a transfer. Most of these guys, I think, have been through 2-3 stops. I can't remember off the top of my head where his last stop was before he ended up there. But Jacoby Wright seems like he's been providing off the bench. So there's definitely something to this South Carolina team. They had a little bit of a light resume until I think I watched them also in like the Clemson game, and I remember they lost that game, but it was kind of one of those things where it was okay. We can kind of pay attention to them. I think I had them in what would have been like my worth mentioning or whatever, but then they kind of hung around but weren't really worth looking at for the next couple of weeks. So they've got 3 quad 1 wins now, but this is definitely by far their best win. They've got Kentucky, Virginia Tech, and Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's having an interesting year. Joe and I talked a little bit about them this week and just how it'd be an odd case for them for what their seed might look like. They've also got a great home win over Mississippi State that I just mentioned. They beat Mizzou and Arkansas. Not really any bad losses besides Georgia. I mean, you can take that or leave that. Georgia looks like they're having one of their, even for that being a quad 3 loss, Georgia looks like they're having one of their better seasons under Mike White. So, or just better for Georgia, not specifically under Mike White. But, this is just one that it's funny because I was watching the game last night, the Arkansas game with someone out when we were out at this thing. And I just said, like this is probably, all my friends know now that, I do a podcast. They're like, all right, Greg, like who's going to win the national championship? Who's the best team? And my first thing I say is like, I have no idea. And the second thing I say is, if you tell me like I gotta bet like our house, like it's probably either going on Kentucky or Purdue at this point, and like the weird thing is like there's probably like 8 to 10 teams that you could like I don't want to say, I don't know if confidently is the right word, but like 8 to 10 teams that I'd be like, yeah, I could see them winning the national championship. The list may be even longer than I haven't like broken it down and been like, yeah, I've seen that. But like the thing about Kentucky is just the depth that they have, the amount of options they have. This game, it's weird to have them lose this game. And South Carolina is a decent team. It's not like they're a Tennessee or something like that in the SEC. But I mean, they're still a decent team. It's still on the road. We just talked about those stats. So this doesn't really scare me. It's still a young team. And the thing with this team is just get them ready for March. They're going to take some bruises. They're going to take some bumps. Every elite team in the country is taking those right now. This really doesn't scare me. I don't know if you feel differently as a Kentucky fan, but I just it's a road game. If this was at home, I might change my tune.
No, I mean, I think you text me maybe concerned about the margin of the game. Kansas lost by 18 to Kentucky 2 years ago, and that was a good Kentucky team. But I also think South Carolina is good too. And you're going to have losses on the road. Let's remember everything you're going to play for in the postseason is not on the road. It is neutral site, and we know Kentucky fans will travel with the best of them to see this team play. I'm concerned about the defense. The defense is very, very bad. Perimeter defense is bad. The rim protection's a little bit better. They put Ugo in against Arkansas, their big guy, and he had a lot of blocks and rim protection, and that was their best defensive game, even though Arkansas has had a rough year. But they have to start wanting to play defense, and John Calipari's, like he said in a lot of his press conferences, he's going to have to stick to it, though. If you don't play defense, we have 10 guys who play offense. We don't need this in particular person. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to Justin Edwards, who has had a little bit of a rough start to his freshman season. I guess it's more than a start at this point, but he's just not really getting into the flow of the offense. And he's even like if you read some of his recruiting reports, like he was never a guy who would go score like 40 and like be that guy who like wanted to score all that much. So he's gonna have to like do the defensive stuff. He's 6'8", can guard smaller guys. Looks like. Can also play a small ball 4 if you need him to. So that could be an X factor there. You just need guys to make it their role to be the glue guy on defense, and they just don't have that right now. So we'll see if someone develops. That could be some could be Edwards, could be down the road. Who knows? Greg, I'm with you. Kentucky and Purdue look like good picks. The defense makes me wonder. I'm also thinking North Carolina, who's just been killing everyone since that Kentucky game. So just another one to watch out for there. Let's keep things moving with our recap here. We have Texas beating Oklahoma 75-60. This one was on the road for Texas. Now, I'd mentioned that they struggled. They're a team we were having trouble figuring out. I mean, both these teams really, but Texas for sure. And then Dylan Dessou comes back and plays really well in this game. Him being out for a lot of the early part of the season, I think, really hurt their chances. Then getting him back, 19 points, 10 rebounds against Oklahoma, you get this win. That's huge because this is a team that, as we mentioned, has enough talent to be even as high as like a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament, but they're closer to the bubble than they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing kind of started last week. They beat Baylor. That game was at home, and we kind of, and then we kind of talked about them last week because of the whole horns down thing with UCF. And then they, Rodney Terry freaks out after they beat Baylor. Their best win in terms of net technically at the moment is still Cincinnati, but this Oklahoma win is right behind there. But it's still one of those weird situations because, if you didn't have the number next to Oklahoma, I don't know. It just there's still a team I can't. This is literally a game between two teams that you'd almost think when we were going into the preseason, the number next to the name would have been on the other side. We would have seen the 11 next to Texas. Just in terms of roster compilation. I mean, you said it. There's names on there. They got dudes. They got Max Asmith. They got Dylan Dessou. They got. I mean, sometimes you forget that Tyrese Hunter is on this team. I mean, there's former 5-star from Iowa State on this team, and he barely even offered any production in this game. They got Caden Shedrick transferring. I mean, they have talent. Mm-hmm. They just, I don't know if this was just one of those, they were pushing the stone up the hill and then, they finally got over the hump. But it's still weird because I'm just still not I think I mentioned Oklahoma a couple weeks ago and I said, Joe, I could see this team being ranked 9th one week and by Selection Sunday, maybe be, in Dayton or even out of the tournament. It's just strange to think that. I'm just still not a believer in this Oklahoma team. I kind of looped them in with BYU, but I feel like BYU's kind of had some wins where I'm like, all right, they're somewhat legit. Like I don't think they're going to completely fall off the face of the map, but I still don't know what to think of this. Like this is not like the staple. Like all right, Texas is here. Yeah, okay, it's a road win in the Big 12. You will take that any day of the week. But got Houston coming up this week, TCU, Iowa State, and Houston again that's over the next. So they're going to have a chance, and that's just life in the Big 12. They're going to have a chance to really make a statement, and like you've already said, they're close to the bubble. So like it's not just make a statement, it's make their case for we should be in the tournament. And if they win a couple of those games, then it might turn into, at this point, I don't know what their ceiling is just because of how, they played early. I don't know if their ceiling is, 4 or 5 seed, but I would think maybe if they win a couple of these games, they could settle in at a 6 or a 7 and be a dangerous 6 or 7. But, it's just odd when you think about, I know I've said this like 6 times by now, but like a buzzer beater at UC, a buzzer beater against an awful Louisville team. And it's just, we're that close to this team fighting for their lives. I mean, they're probably on the right side of the bubble right now, but they're 2 baskets away from probably being not even worth mentioning.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I think talent will win out and they'll make the tournament, and they're going to be a team no one wants to play because of the guard play. Rodney Terry still has a lot of work to do with this team. I'm actually more in on Oklahoma after this week, which is wild because they lost 2 games, and one to Texas and one to Texas Tech, which we get Texas Tech is in that tier of we just don't know. But watching them play was I'd watched them play before, but I feel like they really showed some grit in the Texas Tech game specifically. They have talent. I'm kind of put it this way. They have an easier schedule coming up. There are some road games, which we know that can be anything, but they have Kansas State, UCF, BYU, and then Oklahoma State. If they can win 3 of those games, I'm in on them. I think that's fine. Take care of business what you can. And then the back end of the schedule, you're going to take some losses because you got at Baylor versus Kansas, at Oklahoma State, at Iowa State versus Houston, Cincinnati and Texas at the end. So I like the guard play. I like what Suarez does as well. So I'm gonna say I'm buying into them more. It's just hard to do it in the Big 12 where that really is like I don't even know if there's tiers anymore because Kansas is obviously struggling right now. But like I don't know who is good and who is not in this league. It's going to be one of those when you're filling out your bracket. There could be someone like Kansas who you thought was like one of the best teams in the country who loses second round. There could be a team like Iowa State, who we're going to talk about later, who gets to the Elite Eight. I don't know. That's how crazy it's going to be. With that, we'll move on to Houston beating BYU. They win 75-68. Houston maybe does seem like they're the tier 1 team if there is one. They just struggled out of the gate in their first couple of conference games. LJ Cryer has been a godsend for this team. 23 points in this one. Again, BYU can't really figure them out. They were 2-4 in conference after this game. They beat Texas. We're not going to recap that game specifically, so they're 3-4 now. There's a whole clump of teams who have 3 conference wins in the Big 12 who are under 500 who look like they're good teams, and it's going to be an absolute dogfight to figure out who's going to be, teams seeding for the Big 12 tournament, seeding for the NCAA tournament. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, Houston's currently your clubhouse leader in the net, sitting at number 1. The one thing everybody kind of was saying is, look at their schedule, and now they put together a couple of nice wins in the Big 12 as well. And look, some of these are quad 2 and even quad 3 wins, but like you just do not take any games in this conference for granted. Any Big 12 game, home or away, you get a win, you take it, and the where it appears on your resume may not be exactly where you want it to, but I mean, Kansas goes to UCF and loses, and here we have Houston kind of running them off the court last week, and they get a win over BYU here in this week what we're talking about, and I thought they had one other game this week they won. Maybe I'm not looking at it at the moment, but the Kansas State yesterday, which I don't think we have any reason to talk about, but it looks like they're kind of rounding out and figuring things out. We already mentioned they kind of struggled at the start of the Big 12, which I don't know if you want to say they expected, because they do have Calvin Sampson. It's not his first run in this conference. It's not like, you'd think like he'd kind of tell them, all right, guys, like this is going to be a different animal altogether. Like you have no idea the type of environment, like forget the basketball. Like you have no idea what you're walking into. You're used to American athletic arenas. Like this is going to be different. Well, it seems like they're figuring it out now. Still want to get, like, yes, they're number 1 in the net, but I still want to see them give that signature win Like BYU. Don't get me wrong. Again, I already said, hey, you'll take any win you can get in the Big 12, but I want to see them beat, a Kansas, a Baylor, a something like that, a team that maybe we have less doubts about. On the BYU side, I take it. You take it. I feel like I just said 5 minutes ago. I believe in them more in Oklahoma now. Now I'm looking at the resume again, and it's just like, we'll do it live, Joe. I just like, now I'm second guessing something I said 5 seconds ago. I mean, half their games are still in quadrant 4. They do have some nice wins. I still remember when we talked about them when they beat San Diego State early in the year. They've got, they've got an Iowa State win. I just fifth in the net, Joe. Hard to argue with that.
I'm gonna put a note to myself to pick against BYU in the first round, unless I'll put together a list. Like, unless they're playing X teams that I don't like as much as BYU. If they have a 5 seed, they're going up against the 12. I'm taking the 12. I don't know. They're a team that lives and dies by the 3, so I could end up being very wrong. They get hot for a weekend and they end up in the Sweet 16. They're a team that, though, like you said, they haven't really proven it as much as you would have liked at this point in the season. So matchups mean everything in the tournament. I'm just going to have like a mental note, like a list. I'm going to put a note down in my notes. So like, hey, 90% chance you pick against BYU in the first round. Just something to keep in mind for everyone. I'm sure I'll be wrong, but that's just based on everything we've seen. I'm using an educated guess here.
Pencil in BYU to the Final Four because they shoot 60% from 3 in the first couple of rounds. Just go ahead and pencil it in.
Yeah, now because we said that.
I'm not saying Joe's wrong. I'm just saying when we say it, exactly the opposite is going to happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like we talked about some teams this week. I guess this is another good transition here. About Auburn being a very good team and fun to watch. And Auburn comes into this week and loses 2. We'll start with the first one here. Greg, let's just knock out both of these losses right away for Auburn and just get it off the schedule here. They go to Alabama. There are some lighting issues at Alabama's arena, so that delayed the game a little bit. But Auburn was down by a lot. They ended up coming back, and then Alabama gets the win. Mark Sears plays really well for Alabama. Janai Broome plays well for Auburn, one of the best players in the country this year, regardless of team or ranking or anything. This was a more important game for Alabama, who is now 13-6 after this game, 5-1 in the SEC after this one too. And they needed to have that. They just needed that win. Auburn didn't need it nearly as badly, but now it's getting to the point of like, I'm not saying Auburn was frauds for where they were, but like, how real was it their ranking? How good are they going to be?
I still think they're good, and this isn't like something that I don't know who to credit. I know this was tossed around, and I think I texted this to you this week. Still no quad 1 wins in a power conference. That's just an odd looking resume. I mean, the net still likes them. They're still 9th at the moment. I have their resume up, but like, I liked this team when I saw them play Baylor. I know I've said that a couple of times now. The Bama being so high in the net is something I still need explained to me, but they're at least starting to put some wins together that are maybe making their ranking make sense. It's kind of validating them, being so high. I still think they're too high, but it's a computer system. It's not, a voting system of any sort. So, it is what it is. But I mean, even Auburn with that App State game, like I think like I saw 17-2 this week or something. I know it was a Rothstein tweet. So this is another case of 2 teams that like I don't know exactly where they are, but like my gut says I like Auburn and I think they're good, despite what the resume says. I like the way they play. I like watching them play. Maybe this is one of those bias things where I just enjoy watching them play and watching their style. So I'm gonna like inherently say that I think they're good, but I like them. I still have some doubts in Bama, but they've put a couple of good wins together. I really like the Mississippi State team that they've already beaten this year. So I just and then Auburn turned around and lost to them. We just mentioned that. There's just so many wires that cross this year. It's difficult to, not even just in the Big 12, like Joe mentioned earlier, like it's difficult to just put these teams in like these tiers. Like it's just a one big blob out there. I don't really know where to put this. If you want like an overarching statement for both of these teams right now today, like this Bama team's going to go as far as Mark Sears takes them. As long as he keeps killing it, they're going to be a dangerous team. And they're finally starting to say, okay, the metrics have loved us. Here's why. Here's what we're capable of. Auburn, stifling defense. Maybe got to figure a few things out. They've got talent. I trivia times Joe about at the time who was the fourth leading player for Ken Palm Player of the Year. So they've got the talent too. They definitely, if they want to be a high seed, they need to get some signature wins. There is zero doubt about it. They need something on their resume. And this isn't we're with other teams we're talking about for making the tournament. We're not talking about making the tournament for Auburn. We're talking more like if you want to have I don't think they're going to be in the running for a 1 seed, but if you want to be a 2, 3, 4 seed, they're going to need to have something on their resume to say maybe that's a Kentucky win, a Tennessee win. I'm not looking at their schedule right now. Something like that to kind of put them in that upper echelon.
Definitely. I do think this is not meaning they're frauds. I don't think that maybe they're national title contenders in the way people maybe thought before this game. I mean, I don't know. People really weren't talking about that necessarily, but when you're ranked 8th in the country, that has to be on the back of your mind. This is, I think, a testament to how tough the SEC is. We talk about the Big 12 all the time. SEC, top to bottom, at least besides the bottom two, with Missouri and Vanderbilt being very bad, is very, very tough. So you're talking about the team who's in third to last place right now is Arkansas, who's 1-6 and has not been good this year, and 10-10 overall. But we know Musselman turns it on at this point in the season usually. We also know that they had one of the most best rosters everyone thought coming in because of the transfer portal. Maybe LSU's exceeded expectations at 3-4, but Auburn had 2 road games in the SEC, and neither of the games were against Vanderbilt or Missouri, so they lose both of them. We talked about Kentucky losing at South Carolina. Yes, the Big 12 is very, very tough. The SEC is pretty tough too. There's 2 of the best conferences in basketball. Greg, we had conversations about how they've invested into basketball, specifically these last 6-7 years with the coaches they brought in and the money they've been putting in. So I think if you have those 2 conferences and the Big East, you really have a good picture of what a good basketball conference looks like. And then you go to some of the other conferences like the ACC, where it's struggling the last couple of years. And UNC's good, but who else is actually good? Duke looks like they're solid, but maybe not a lead or anything. Virginia's hit or miss, as we talked about all year. NC State had a good start, but now it's kind of fading. We don't even know anything about the ACC besides UNC. Same thing with the Pac-12 is not very good this year. A lot of the teams have fallen off. I know there's some teams that we want to see make the tournament. So it's a tough league. It's not something historically you'd think is a top 2 or 3 basketball league, but it is this year for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll go to the Big Ten. That's the other one. I mean, oh boy, that Big Ten, you never know with those guys. But Purdue and Wisconsin having good seasons, but everyone else has had some issues, and that includes Illinois. That is both on the court and off the court for them. But this one is on the court. Northwestern beats them in overtime, 96-91. Boo Buie had 29 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals in this one. He's a star. Coleman Hawkins for Illinois played well, but they, I think, are trying to find their footing after getting Terrence Shannon back, trying to rework the rotation and everything. Northwestern, on the other hand, likely would be ranked if they didn't lose to Chicago State. Probably would be a top 20 team heading into this updated week's polls, and could be maybe that 3rd or 4th best team in the Big Ten, or probably the 4th best team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I was looking because just someone mentioned in one of our group chats that Northwestern had run Ohio State off the court, and it's funny to me because Northwestern is still they just ran Ohio State off the court, and they're still, I think it was as of last night. I'll check what it is this morning. I think they were 69th in. Okay, so they did move up after that win. They're now 61st in the net, and Ohio State is 68. So after that result, they did flip flop. But I did think it was funny that until last night, Ohio State was 17 slots ahead of Northwestern in the net. And it was just, I guess it just had to be that Chicago State loss. But Northwestern looks legit. It's just unfortunately that one quad 4 result that seems to be weighing them down. But you're going to need to explain to me how where's FAU? FAU is currently sitting at 27th in the net, and they don't have near the wins that I guess they have the Arizona win and maybe the Texas A&M win, but I feel like Northwestern's got some pretty darn good wins between Purdue, Illinois, and the net loves Michigan State. It's just some of this math is funny math, man. I don't get it, but it's time to start paying attention to Northwestern, Illinois. I mean, you know how it is. You throw a player back in the rotation, and he didn't have his best game. He didn't shoot that well from the field. I mean, if you look across the kind of the stat lines from this game, I mean, it looks like it was an overtime game that was close. I mean, they got 22 from Damask, 22 from Hawkins, 15 from Guerrier, who kind of stepped up a little bit when Terrence Shannon was out, so that's good for them. They got 14 points off their bench. Dane just seems like he's kind of faded a little bit. I really liked him in the beginning of the year, and just as it be coming into the year, but it seems like he's not getting a lot of minutes. I don't know what's going on with that. Northwestern, it's time to start turning on their games because again, aside from that one kind of bad result, they're making it known that they're going to be something to look at in the big. I mean, they're 6-3 in the Big Ten. If I remember last year, like the winner of the Big Ten was like a 12-6 team or so? That was the winner of the Big Ten. I can't remember what the records were. I just remember thinking last year the Big Ten was okay. So it was now I'm remembering this. It was Northwestern last year that last day of Big Ten play could have either been a 2 seed or a 9 seed based on it was something like that. With their last day of regular season play would have been either like a 2 seed or a 9 seed in the Big Ten tournament based on how their last conference game finished. That's how jumbled up it was, and it feels like it's going to be that way again this year, the Big Ten.
It definitely could be. Just a note here too, Northwestern, that loss to Chicago State, the net ranking being what it is, it's kind of interesting that the net got so many things right last year, despite like everyone still having issues with it. Like, I despise the net. I think it's criminal that we have a formula to decide NCAA tournament teams that is secretive and they don't tell anyone what actually goes into it. That's stupid. But they had FAU highly ranked in the net last year. We had UConn was like top 5. The only team in the Final Four, because San Diego State was rated high too, the only team in the Final Four that wasn't ranked very high, I think they were like 25 or something like that, was Kansas State. So it is weird how it predicts stuff, and I just constantly don't understand that. So if you asked me like who was the better team, I might say like FAU over Northwestern. If you told me who had the better resume, I'd probably say Northwestern over FAU. Taking into account, a lot of times they don't look at the exact wins of the team; they just look at the quad one. So, just interesting to note as we move forward towards March. And let's go to Thursday, Greg. We have Oregon State with Jordan Pope scoring 31 points, beating Arizona 83-80. Now, Arizona's had their issues this year. They now have 5 losses. They had a tough non-conference schedule, so they're still going to be ranked after this loss. But it's getting to the point where I just don't know whether to say, hey, as long as this team has some good wins, I should just say, screw it. That doesn't matter. This game doesn't matter because Oregon State's not going anywhere this year. I don't know. It's definitely concerning. I still this is a team I could see losing in the first game or going to the Elite Eight. It's just kind of the same thing with some of the other teams we talked about today.
Well, you want to talk about, you could see them. I mean, they lost to Princeton last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a 15. So, I mean, they've taken of their 5 losses. First of all, they've taken them all within the last 10 games, I think 12 games. So they're on a little bit of a rough patch. Now, we're saying a rough patch for a team that's probably top 10, top 15 caliber, but this is a rough patch for them. They did get a win yesterday at Oregon. That's nothing, especially that's one of the, I would say that second tier teams in the Pac-12, and that's a road game, and we already know what that means in college basketball this year, so that's definitely something worth taking. But it definitely scares me that we're talking about a team that already got upset last year, and yes, they have some different pieces. There's definitely a different team compilation. There's the roster's not necessarily the same, but there's some similarities, some carryovers. It just makes you wonder if you see that right matchup or wrong matchup, however you want to phrase it. You might be right. Could they lose on the first day? Are they one of the least likely top 4 seeds to make the second weekend. I don't know. I don't know where to put this team. I think they're good. I've had my qualms with Caleb Love, but he's playing pretty well this year. Statistically, it's his best year of college basketball, and I haven't checked in the last couple of days, but I know over the last couple of weeks we've talked about this a little bit. So, I mean, the resume as it is still looks good. They are still fourth in the net. This is their worst loss. Of course, this whole kind of skid started when they lost to Stanford. They let up 100. I think that's maybe the bigger thing is these losses they have. They'll let up 80, 90, 100 points. I think that's the scarier thing because this team can score. They can absolutely score. That's not going to be their issue, So I think they just got to figure out how to play defense, and maybe that's something Tommy Lloyd can get them to do, and maybe it's not. They might be in that same boat as Kentucky at the moment.
Definitely going to be in that same boat. For the time being, I'm just going to chalk it up to it doesn't mean anything. I just don't know how else to see this season of college basketball. For other teams, I will say it means something. It's very contradictory. We'll just have to go, but go as the flow goes and see how it goes. But the Arizona's wins, I think, offset it. So I honestly couldn't tell you how this team's going to be, how March is going to be, how any of this is going to be for any of these teams. One thing I will tell you, Greg, we got to stop talking about Michigan State. We got to stop talking about them. The media, 12-8 overall.
Rank them, Joe. Rank Michigan State. It's time to rank them.
We had, after their win over Baylor, Oakland, Stony Brook, Indiana State, and Penn State, the national media, including Seth Davis on CBS, let's rank them. Let's rank them. They've lost 3 games since then. 3 out of 7, but that's not good. This is a flawed team. I won't take too much time on this game. We have to recap here. Wisconsin beat them. Wisconsin's the class of the top of the class of the Big Ten with Purdue. AJ Storrs brought something different. We've mentioned that already. They're fine. But I'm using this time to just say, hey, Michigan State, I know you're going to go win 5 games in a row again and be back in a good position to make the tournament. But until that happens, don't rank them. Don't do it.
I'm just glad we finally get to talk about something that makes sense. I remember picking this game last week and thinking to myself, please, Wisconsin, don't lose this game because I'm just gonna not. I'm just not gonna know what to do with myself if am I gonna have to say this is a fault on Wisconsin or Michigan State is just please don't lose this game. And thankfully they didn't just win the game. I mean, they controlled the game. Pretty darn good game from AJ Storr, 28 points, 9 of 7 from the field. I'm sorry, 9 of 17 from the field. If he went 9 of 7 from the field, that would be a whole other issue. This team is, it's turning out to be, what we thought they would be. Early in the season we saw them. We thought they were a pretty decent team. Looks like Connor Sejan seems like he's maybe getting some more minutes and providing some more production. I don't know if we'll see him back in the starting lineup at any point. It seems like he's being productive off the bench. This is just a crafty team. They're difficult to play against. 16-4. They've got some pretty darn good wins between the Marquette win. They beat actually Michigan State twice now. They beat them home and away. They've just got a pretty. Their only losses are Tennessee, Arizona, and Providence when Providence had Bryce Hopkins, and the only bad loss is Penn State. We kind of talked about, everybody gets one, and theirs just happened to come later in the season. Indiana is actually a quad 3 win for them. That program, we don't even need to talk about them, but they're in an interesting state right now. So I'm with you on Michigan State. It stinks to sit here and say man, this is one of my Final 4 picks at the beginning of the year, and now we're sitting here and I'm like, that team stinks. But just as well as I do that in 2-3 weeks we're going to be talking about them. We're going to say, man, I can't believe they've run off 5 straight wins and Izzo's figured it out. Just wait till that calendar flips, and then we'll be talking about them. They'll be a 10 seed and nobody will want to play them, and they have talent. It's just there's something they can't figure out this year. I don't know if you have more insight into what it is or what their issue is, but I feel like this is just another case of a team proving not what we thought they'd be in the preseason, but proving what we've seen. They're sticking to what we've seen them be as the season has progressed. Finally, something that makes sense.
Yeah, they are just not a good team. I think they got overrated after a Last year wasn't the greatest season. I think a lot of times college basketball fans focus too much on what happens in March Madness, and if we're gonna say it's a great tournament and it's a crapshoot, then let's do it. Like, let's say it. Like, they had a 7 seed last year. Was that right? Like, that's not a great team for Izzo. That's not a good team for Michigan State. It's cool that maybe at the end of the year they put things together, but that's part of it. I think having shooting, not having them as many scorers. I'll say scorers. I think not having as many scorers on the floor it has been tough. I mean, Tyson Walker scoring 19 points a game is just trying to carry this team. It's just not much else out there besides him. There's some athletes. These need to find guys who can put the ball in the basket though. So I don't think they're very good. I think we'll be talking about them in a couple of weeks and saying, oh, well, they're 16-10 now. Well, are they going to make the tournament? Like, probably, maybe, I guess. I don't know, but it doesn't mean I'm going to pick them or believe in them. I could always see Izzo in March, but just at some point, you have to see them for what they are and kind of recognize March is a big part of college basketball. It's not the only thing that happens in college basketball. We've been doing a podcast for 4 or 5 months now, so that's how it goes. Greg, let's move on to Kansas and Iowa State. Kansas loses on the road. Now, there's a couple things to get here for this game overall. First of all, I famously said earlier this year, I don't think Hilton Magic is really that real. I think Iowa State just has good players. I think that's true. I mean, maybe Hilton Magic is real too. It's good to have both if you have both. But they win this game 79-75. We have to talk about, I think, Iowa State being a very good team and everything, but the focus here has to be Kansas because they were not favored on the road. I think Vegas is starting to figure out some of the Kansas issues. They got 2 points off the bench. It was from Parker Braun, who is not much of an impact player. So they've took Elmarco Jackson out of the starting lineup. We mentioned that. They put Furphy in, and Furphy's scoring. But now their issue is they have 5 starters they rely on, and then there's nothing else. Like, Nick Timberlake's not giving them anything. Elmarco Jackson's not giving them anything. They have to develop that bench quick because if there's foul trouble with anyone on this team, they are screwed. And then after the game, Greg, I'll let you get to all this in a second, but Bill Self said the Big 12 isn't really like a real champion because it's not a round robin anymore. And it's just like, okay, dude, we get you're having a tough year, and I respect Bill Self. I think he is the best coach in the sport. But you can't be saying stuff like that. Come on.
Yeah, I remember last week when we were talking about, I think Nick Timberlake had like a 10 or 12 point game. Maybe it was against West Virginia. I think we had said like there was somebody out or something. And we said, oh, okay, well, there's like a, that silver lining. Cause I think also Marco Jackson maybe had a decent game. But a week later, here we are, we're back to basically, it's like 3 dudes plus Johnny Furphy now. And, DeJuan Harris is still, playing the distributor role, and like that's the entire team. This is just another one of those things that finally we can say like this makes sense. Like we know what this team's flaws are. They have no depth, they have no options. I don't foresee somebody suddenly stepping up. The name that on the Iowa State side, the name that I kept hearing in this game was Trey King. Had a really, really nice shooting night, 4 of 7 from 3, and I can't even remember who was calling the game. We were getting ready to go to this thing this weekend, so I can't remember who it was, but I know they kept saying that like the scouting report on him was let him shoot from deep because I think he'd only taken like a handful of threes, and I guess he made him pay. But as a team, they shot nearly 50% from 3. That is a little interesting. It's not often you shoot 50% from 3 and you only win by a couple, but Kansas made a late surge in this game, so it was a lot. Like the margin was a lot more until Kansas got a turn. I think it was like a turnover here or there, and they hit I think like McCullough and Dickinson hit 2 straight threes, and that kind of closed the. But by 15 seconds left, it was clear the game was over. But still, you go 14 from 30 from 3. You'd think it'd be more of a blowout, but it wasn't. It's a good win for Iowa State. They are whatever we want to say about Kansas, 4-3 in the Big 12. Still think they're obviously we know their starters are very talented. They're very good. This is still a good win for Iowa State, and we're gonna say okay, this is that now this kind of gets us to okay, what do we think of Iowa State? We're not going to beat the dead horse on Kansas anymore. They've got potential, but they're one injury away, one whatever away from maybe not even making it out of the first weekend, despite being an elite team. So now Iowa State's got even just in the last month, they've got the Houston win. That was at home. They've got this Kansas win. They beat TCU, who, I think a couple weeks ago we said, we don't know what to think of them. And now they seem like they're kind of maybe having a tournament type year. They've got a couple of decent wins. They've got absolutely zero bad losses, no losses outside of Q1. That's a pretty strong resume, and 10th in the net shows it. I don't know what their ceiling is. And maybe this is just shows that I need to make a point to watch them more. But, I'm not talking about what's their seed. Their resume is going to tell us what their seed is. But in a wild year like this, is it weird to think, I just feel like there's been like these elite Iowa State teams, like, the Niangs and the Naslongs and that we watched. And, those years where college basketball made sense and the good teams were good and the bad teams were bad. In a year like this, is it weird to think like you could envision this team making the Elite Eight? Like I don't know. Their resume says they're good, but it's almost like they don't have that it factor for me to tell me like, yeah, this is what's going to carry them to second weekend and beyond.
I'm with you. I don't know what to think of this team in terms of long run. I don't hold anything back anymore with March after what we saw last year with how many teams that were lower seeds went far in the tournament. The craziness of this year makes me think that maybe we're going to get all chalk because we do have so many upsets during the regular season. That's usually how it goes. If you do have such a crazy regular season, when you get to the tournament, the top teams move on. But I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, there's a lot of good games left to be had for Iowa State to prove themselves. I'm with you. I don't really know. I could see them making the Elite Eight, but it would be one of those things where it'd be like I'd be a little surprised to see them there. So, all right. So we already talked about Auburn losing to Mississippi State, Greg. But just a quick point about Mississippi State: they put Josh Hubbard into the starting lineup. That's given them more of a scoring punch. They only scored 64 points in this game. I don't know if you had anything more to add to this one. I know we already talked about it before. All right. Well, we'll keep it moving then. TCU and Baylor. This was great. This was a triple overtime game. I was able to tune in for the last part of the fourth quarter and then the overtimes. The worst part about it was the camera angle again, and Baylor fans are very in denial about it, but it's very bad. But TCU wins 105-102, triple overtime. Jameer Nelson Jr. had 30 points in this game. This is a rivalry game. It was Jamie Dixon versus Scott Drew. I want to say I'm more surprised about TCU this year than a lot of other teams. They had a lot of transfers and some talent, but like Jameer Nelson, did we think he was going to be this good, scoring 30 points against Baylor? Baylor's defense still has some issues. I have a whole heap of ideas about this game, but really it boils down to the same thing we've said, Greg, where it's like these two teams are in that middle of the Big 12, and I can't figure out either one. Can't do it.
I literally, Joe, it couldn't be more than one or two pods ago. It was maybe after TCU beat Houston, and we were just like, man, like, I think what I actually said was, Joe, I don't know if you have any thoughts on TCU. I don't know what to think of this team. And we may have even both said, I don't think this is a tournament team. I think now they're, I don't want to say they're a shoe-in to make the tournament because, in the Big 12, you could definitely end up all of a sudden you're on a 5-game losing skid and, at 15-10, that may be good enough to get you in just because you're in the Big 12. But still, they look like a tournament team with some of these wins they're putting together. I mean, if you just look down the roster, maybe we kind of underestimated this team. There's some guys. I'm with you. I think Jameer Nelson Jr. transferring from Delaware, I don't think we maybe thought he was going to be this good. But, Emmanuel Miller, Micah Peavy transferring from Texas Tech. He's been there for a while. Avery Anderson, really good distributing the ball, transfer from Oklahoma State. They got Ernest Uday transferring from Kansas. They got a lot of talent on this team. Chuck O'Bannon's still on this team. Xavier, well, some of these guys aren't even contributing, but there's just names on this team that you look down and you say, okay, like there's something to this team. You have a triple overtime loss as Baylor, like you'd love to have gotten this game, but it is what it is. 25 from Misi, we like that. We like 24 from Dennis. I mean, and again, it's a triple overtime game, but so some of this stuff is going to be inflated. But they look like they maybe have something going there, despite the fact that they lost this game. I think we're going to find that TCU is maybe a better team than we gave them credit for. I'm not faulting Baylor for this loss. It's just life in the Big 12. It's a triple overtime game. That's about as far as you can take it without it being, who was it? Syracuse, UConn going to 6 overtimes. You know, you lose a triple overtime game in the Big 12, it basically means, all right, you gave it all you had and you just came up literally a bucket short. I was only able to catch the very end of this game, and I had to watch it on my phone, so the camera angle didn't bother me as much. I don't know if it's just a perspective thing. I have yet to watch one of the games in the new Baylor arena on TV. I've only watched this game on my phone, so I don't have any comments on that. I know everybody doesn't like it, but TCU looks like they're putting something together. Baylor, I'm not. I know we've had our worries with them, but it looks like they've got some depth and they've got some dudes. So that if anything, I'm not really worried about them. But it's still that weird thing where it's like I could see them being an Elite Eight team, or I could see them getting upset in the first round. It just I don't know.
Yep, a lot of question marks this year, college basketball. Greg, we are going to move on to Dayton at Richmond. Richmond wins at 69-64. They are undefeated in the A10. They are in first place in the A10 now. We mentioned that the A10 could be a two-bid league this year, which again would be Richmond would still be a bubble stealer if they go through everything. That's likely they're not going to make an at-large bid if Dayton wins the conference tournament. But Dayton gets a loss, and it's understandable. You're on the road against another very good team. So I didn't get a chance to watch this one. I'm going to let you take it away.
So here's what's understandable. Richmond is still sitting at I think they were 6-0. Now they're 7-0 in the A10. Like, this is on the road. Like, this is the game. If you're going to lose a game, this is the game that maybe turns this league. I'm not saying Richmond's going to get an at-large, but then if we go to the A10 final and you lose that game, then it's like, okay, that you could say, all right, then maybe this is a two-bid league. And that's the only. I think I've already said this is the only way they're going to end up a two-bid league is if Dayton basically makes the A10 final and loses, and this would probably be that team. The thing that scares me the most, I don't know if I'm assuming you probably don't have the box score in front of you, but 15 points at half for Dayton as a team. They only gave up 20, but that's a pretty bad half. Duran had, I think it was 3 at half. He finishes with 9 points, 8 rebounds. Not one of his better games. Javon Bennett gives him 18. That's pretty good. He's been leading the team at points since Malachi Smith went down, and he's done a pretty good job of that. Kobe Brea, 2 of 5 from 3. Still, that's 40%, and take that from basically anyone. For him, unfortunately, that'll bring his percentage down because he was shooting almost 50% on the year. The one note that I know this was a Rothstein tweet is the interesting thing about Richmond is they're 15-5, undefeated in the A10, and they had one of their better players, Burton, transfer to, and I don't have it in front of me. I know we've talked about, he's on one of the teams that we've talked about. I cannot recall. Villanova. Okay, yeah. I was like, I know I've seen him play this year. Just an interesting note on that team that you lose one of your better players. It's now playing in a high division, and I'm wondering if him being on Villanova with the way they're playing, maybe he wishes he was back at Richmond enjoying this run with them, but who knows? Maybe he was a grad transfer or something and couldn't have gone back anyway. But it's just scary for Dayton to only put up 15 in the first half. They do score almost 50 in the second half, so that's just always the one thing with Dayton is the offense. It seems like the defense always there, but sometimes that offense just isn't there. And we've had games where they're shooting lights out. I think it was last week they shot 59% from 3. So this is kind of like what we talked about with BYU. It's like if they're hitting, they're a difficult team to beat, but like who's not? If you're shooting 50-60% from 3, who's not difficult to beat? Mm-hmm. That's just going to be the thing to watch. If they get hot, if they get, what do you think this team's going to be? 7 seed, 9? I don't know where they're. I think yes, they're ranked, top 15, but I don't think they're going to be a top 4 or 5 seed. I just think they're just the weakness of the league that they're in. The resume is not going to be padded very much. They may take another hit or two, probably end up again somewhere between 7 and 10, but they would be a dangerous one because if they're hitting those shots, it's just like BYU. You could see them losing the first round. You could also see them picking off the 1 seed in the second game.
Yeah, I think probably more so in that 8-9 range. We saw FAU with that high net ranking last year, meaning nothing, and they were in a league that was worse than the A10, but like they had a better, probably going to finish with a better record regular season for the committee to evaluate. But I would think 8-9 doesn't make any sense with the rankings. Doesn't make any sense based on what we've seen. But hopefully they rebound or something like that in the next couple weeks here and can kind of finish strong. And maybe, I don't know, like I would like to reward teams like this and give them, like last year I thought FAU should be like a 5 or a 6 seed. Just based, if you're going to have a system that has a net, might as well use it. I mean, I don't understand it. I hate it, but that's something that just defies all logic. So yeah, I think 8 or 9 team, but a team that no one's going to want to face. And if they're an 8 or 9, and we're talking about some of these teams like Texas earlier in the show, that could be 7, 8, 9, 10. Man, watch out for some of these upsets second round, not just first round, but second round too. The last game we'll recap, Greg. We have Ole Miss beating Texas A&M 71-68. Big win for Ole Miss. They're now 17-3 on the season. Chris Beard getting them into range to make the tournament. Unless there's an utter collapse, they will be in the tournament. Texas A&M has been dealing with injuries. Henry Coleman came off the bench in this one. This is one where you're kind of starting to think, okay, they're 12-8. This is getting dicey. The only saving grace for them with the injuries and everything else is just that they have 4 quad 1 wins. So they can build on that. Hopefully they can finish well down the stretch, because it would be very, very awesome to see Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford in March.
I believe I said something. I texted Joe about this week. It's just this team it just makes me sad, because I'm not saying I'm like rooting for them, but like it's definitely a team I want to see in March. They've got plenty of talent. We got to see them live this year when they played at Ohio State in the non-con, and I don't even think they were anything close to full strength. Not that they had the roster together, everybody was healthy, but it seemed like they improved from there, and then they just hit this string of injuries and just have not been the same. That's kind of where we've been with them for the last couple of weeks. I feel like I need them to get. Can you think about this team? First of all, Joe, if this team goes to Dayton, we're going. Like we may go anyway. Just we'll see if Mr. Rob Haynes can work that into the game house budget. But I am not missing a Texas A&M if they end up an 11 or 12 seed or whatever, and then Dayton, because that's got the workings of a UCLA, Syracuse type, like 11 seed to the Final Four. Maybe Final Four is a stretch, but you know what I mean. A team that can do real damage as a double-digit seed because of the circumstances that they dealt with this year. I feel like that's what we've said about Texas A&M for a couple weeks now. It's unfortunate. We'll just have to keep an eye on them. Ole Miss, what is this team? Because they've been boat raced by the elite teams in the SEC that they've played, Tennessee and Auburn. They have the loss to LSU. This is their best win, and their other good wins are UCF, Florida, Memphis, who obviously has taken a step down. Let's see how many. So they've got 13 games in quad 3 and 4, and they've only played 20. So like literally, almost 75% of their schedule is in quad 3 and quad 4. So they've played a lot of, I guess, for lack of a better term, cupcake games. But one of those games in quad 3 is Arkansas. Like that's what it. Who knows? I don't know, Joe. This is definitely a team that like. I don't know what is. They're 57th in the net right now. They're 17-3. It's like, could you see a team with this good of a record? I don't know if missing the turn. Like I don't. If you're doing right, you've done. I don't know when your last bracketology was. Do you have this team in your field? Like I don't know what to do with them.
It was a couple weeks ago. Another one's coming out this upcoming week. But yeah, I think they're probably going to be it unless they collapse. They just need to get. If they get 5 or 6 more wins, it'd be very hard to keep them out with 22, 23 wins, assuming, a lot of those SEC wins would not be in those quad 3, quad 4s. I think they definitely make the tournament in a matter of what seed they get. again, just we talked about Dayton. I don't know. I don't know if they're a 7-loss team going into the tournament. What seed you give them? Is it like an 8 seed, a 9 seed? Is it a team I want to play? Not necessarily. It's not like the toughest team in the world that I would like. Oh, I don't want to play them. But it is very very odd, their resume in comparison to other teams that are in the Power Six conferences.
I mean, here's what they got coming up, Joe. This is their next 4 games. We're not going to pick. I don't believe we're going to pick one of these games, but I think we're picking the other that they have this week. So they got Mississippi State. That's at home. They've got Auburn. That's at home. At South Carolina. At Kentucky. There you go. There's 4. I believe that is 4. Mississippi State's right on the borderline of being quad 1, but so that Mississippi State game will be a quad 2. But that is 3 quad 1 opportunities and a quad 2. Mississippi State could drop into the top 35, and then it would be a quad 1. Here's your chance. You want to tell us that you're good? Here's your chance. I mean, you pick. I would say if I'm, and we have a friend who's an Ole Miss fan. I think I would settle for one of those games. If they go 2-2, I'm elated. If you win, I don't care what 2 of those games it is. You win 2 of those games, great. I don't foresee any scenario where they win 3 of those, but I am absolutely ecstatic if they win 2 of those games.
I would be too. We'll see how they do over these next couple weeks. Very important stretch of games for them. That is our recap for the week. Now we're recording early. It is going to be on Sunday. We kind of weighed the options of recording early, late. UConn's up by 40 on Xavier. Purdue's up 10 on Rutgers. Not saying Rutgers can't come back. It's very early. And North Texas is beating FAU. So if anything notable does happen from these games, because we also have Nevada and New Mexico tonight, we will update everyone next week.
Yeah, Joe, I did think it was kind of bold to do a podcast before Rutgers played Purdue, just knowing everything that's going on with those 2 teams. But here we are. So just hold your breath, I guess.
Well, it's up to 21-7. They're up by 14 points now. So I just thought it was too good to be true that Rutgers could do it again. We'll move on to our picks. Now, there's so many games this week. We may not even get to recapping all these next week. It's just how it is. But this is like a do not call, do not text week. Specifically on Saturday, there are games where you do not want to leave your house if you have the option. So a very good college basketball week, and that's good because we have a break with the Pro Bowl next week for NFL, and obviously no college football anymore. So this is a good week if you're trying to settle into the college basketball season. Hey, calendar's turning over to February. This is the time to do it. Let's start off with Houston at Texas. Houston number 4 right now. Texas, as we mentioned, needs to keep on stacking some wins here to make sure they make the tournament.
I'm going to take Houston. Texas has the talent to win this game. It is at home, but I am still a bigger believer in Houston at the moment. I think they're kind of hitting their stride, and I would, again, just for something to make sense this year, I'll go ahead and take Houston.
Yeah, I thought about taking Texas. I'm going to go Houston too. Houston has the brutal schedule this week of having Texas and Kansas both on the road. It's not something I want to wish on anyone there. But I'm going with Houston in this one at least because I think Jamal Shead is one of the most underrated players in the country. I've talked about him, preseason show and everything. 5.8 assists. He's not the guy who scores the ball a lot. LJ Cryer's the one who scores, but I think you have a point guard like that. It protects the basketball. I think it's going to be really good for them over the next couple months here. All right, on Tuesday, we have South Carolina and Tennessee. You mentioned that South Carolina had that big win over Kentucky this past week. They also won again this weekend as well. So they go into this Tennessee game at 17-3. Tennessee's at 5-1 in the conference, tied atop the SEC. They're 5th in the country right now, 15-4. Should be a good one in Thompson Bowling Arena.
Excited to watch this game. I'm picking Tennessee. There's just one of the few teams that I feel like I've been able to, even though they've had taken their lumps and their bruises, one of the few teams I feel like I've been able to depend on. This game's at home, which inevitably probably means if they're ranked in the top 10, they're going to lose. So I'll just take Tennessee just so I can say I was wrong.
Yeah. I'm going Tennessee as well. It stems just from how much I've loved them all year. Dalton Knecht is on a tear right now. I have to mention that. I think he's averaging 32 points per game over his last 4 or 5 games. Just on fire. If they can get that scoring and have the defense show up from everyone else, that is going to be huge. So I'm going to go Tennessee over South Carolina, and that takes us to Oklahoma and Kansas State. This one's at Kansas State. Again, 2 of these teams that we're trying to figure out in this muddled Big 12. Greg, who are you going with?
I plead the 5th.
Yep.
I have so usually I put our picks together for the week, and Joe texted me this morning. He said, "Hey, you want to go ahead and record? We're recording this Sunday morning, like you just mentioned, or Sunday afternoon at this point." So I'm doing this live. So everything is just going to be a gut reaction.
Best way to pick them. Best way to do it.
I'll just go Kansas State, just because they're at home, and just continue to sit on that. I just don't believe in Oklahoma.
I'm going Oklahoma. I don't believe in Kansas State. I they lost 2 games this past week. Yes, it was tough road games at Iowa State, at Houston. They lost at Texas Tech. So maybe you say, okay, it's a road thing. Their wins in Big 12 play, Baylor, okay, we don't really know what that is. We also have the Jerome Tang, Scott Drew thing. We don't know how much he knows or how to attack. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and UCF. Outside of that, they beat Villanova. We don't know how good that win is after this weekend, especially after Butler beat Villanova. They beat LSU. That's great. They beat Providence. That's cool. That actually was good at that point because Bryce Hopkins was there. Jerome Tang's doing a fantastic job because I don't think this team has the type of talent that they deserve this type of record. I'm going to go Oklahoma, full knowing that it'll backfire. I just like Oklahoma a little bit better. Let's go San Diego State at Colorado State. As mentioned, the Mountain West is going to be a bloodbath. They've gotten 4 teams in the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. Could be having 4, 5, or 6 if things go right, but they need some good results here. So we have San Diego State, Colorado State, Greg.
Yeah, we did not talk about this, but Colorado State lost this week at Wyoming, and I can't remember who, but Wyoming just beat somebody. Maybe it was Boise or something. Wyoming just beat somebody else. It seems like Laramie is not a good place to play for anyone in the Mountain West. I don't think Wyoming is going to be anywhere near making the tournament this year, but it seems like they are where the dreams of a 6-bid Mountain West go to die. I am with Colorado State kind of reeling. I'm going to take San Diego State. And they're just a team that with Jaden Ledee has been on our radar and we've talked about a lot. Colorado State kind of seems like they are taking a step back, so I'll take San Diego State even though they're on the road.
Yeah, 2 losses this past week at Nevada, at Wyoming for Colorado State. I'll go with Colorado State, but they better win. I mean, they're 3-4 right now. They go to 3-5 in conference, 15-6 overall in this game if they lose. Yeah, the idea of the 4, 5, 6 teams Mountain West, I don't know, might be down to 3 or 4 at that point. Just the attrition in this league is tough. Colorado State's 3-4, Nevada's 3-3. Those are the 2 of the teams we thought would make the tournament. So we'll see if they're able to bounce back. I'll go Colorado State at home. Could see it going either way though. We'll stay in the Mountain West for Wednesday. We have another big game with Boise at New Mexico. One where I think these 2 teams are on the favorable side right now. That could all change by next week.
The Pit is a difficult place to play, and I've even heard some people say it's one of those places you gotta see a game at least once. Of course, we all know the coach out there, Richard Pitino. So I'll go ahead and despite that kind of role that Boise's been on, I'll go ahead and take New Mexico. I just think they got some electrifying players between Mashburn and Jalen House, and just a couple other guys. This game is at home. They're healthy. They started the year fine, but ran into some injury issues, dropped a game here or there. I'll just take New Mexico at home.
I'm taking Boise State. They're my guys. One of the 2 teams I predicted in the Mountain West to make the tournament this year, because again I thought the transfer portal would hurt them a little bit more, and some teams just came out of Nevada and Utah State just came out of nowhere, to be quite frank. But I'm going Boise. I think they're more desperate for this win. They are 5-2 in conference right now, but 14-6 overall. I just with some of these Mountain West teams, I think when you creep closer to double-digit losses, it's going to be tougher and tougher to make the tournament. So, Colorado State with 5 losses, Boise State with 6 losses. Those are the teams I'm concerned about the most. Their backs are against the wall. I'm going to take Boise. I think they can get the job done on the road. All right, we'll go over to Saturday. There's not many good games on Thursday or Friday, but we'll tell you what, Saturday, like I said earlier, is the game to make sure you're at home, make sure you don't have any plans if possible. I know it's sometimes tough if you've been watching football this whole season and had some excuses for the past couple months. But let's get things started here, Greg. We have Utah State and San Diego State. This was at 3:30 Eastern on Fox, one that I think national fans should watch if they can on 2 screens, because there's another game going on at the same time we'll pick next. But a very big one in the Mountain West again.
I'll take Utah State in this game. I don't have a thesis behind this one. This is, again, most of these are just gut reaction. I just for some reason, part of me doesn't see San Diego State getting both of these wins this week. Maybe it ends up flip flopping and they lose on the road to Colorado State, and they win at home against Utah State. But I don't see San Diego State getting both of these wins, so I'll pick Utah State.
I'm going to go San Diego State at home, so we just flip on San Diego State split there. I do like what they've done this season. I do think that they are in a position where they're not as desperate as other teams. They have the 4 losses, so if they get a 5th or 6th loss in the first week of February, it's not the worst thing in the world, especially because they have some wins out of conference to help them out as well. So I still need to see more out of Utah State and Nevada, to be honest. This teams, again, just took us by surprise. We just didn't expect them to be this good. All right, 4 p.m. This is the game I mentioned that you want to have 2 screens to be able to watch both of them. We have Houston at Kansas, the 2 best teams in the Big 12 right now, at least by the AP rankings. We'll see if that changes this week, but it should be a very, very good game.
I'm going to take Houston. We just still have our fears about Kansas. I don't, in any stretch, think they're a bad team. I just think they're a flawed team. I know it is at Fog Allen, but I am just feeling Houston in this one.
I'm going to go Houston as well. As mentioned, I do not like Kansas's current makeup. The starting 5 is good, but any sort of foul trouble, they're in danger. Houston can keep on throwing bodies at them, and I really do like Jamal Shed as a good point guard in the country. I think he just, again, underrated player in the country. He should be known by a lot more people. Auburn at Ole Miss, another one that's interesting because Auburn lost the 2 games last week. We just mentioned Ole Miss is tough to figure out. Greg, this is one of the opportunities you said they had to prove themselves.
Auburn needs this. This would be their I think Mississippi State is their first opportunity this week, but that would be at the moment that would be a quad 2. It's over 35 ranked Mississippi State at home, so this would be their best opportunity, I think, to get a good quad 1 win. Who knows if they're 50? Ole Miss is 57th in the net. 75 is the cap for a road game. Who knows if it'll stay quad 1, but it's definitely a decent win. This is the kind of game that Auburn needs, because if you lose it, then that fraud talk, the dial's going to turn way up on it. And maybe we'll start talking about Ole Miss a little more, but I think that the conversation is going to be more on Auburn. I'll go ahead and pick Auburn just because they need this game.
I'm going Auburn too. I like how they play, and I'm not going to let one bad week where they had 2 road games really come into that. I'm changing my opinion of them. This is also a road game, so that makes it tougher, but I think coming home for a little bit, settling down should help them out. I'll take Auburn over Ole Miss. That takes us to Duke and UNC. As mentioned, it's a wonderful Saturday of college basketball when you get a lot of these teams matching up. We have Duke at 6-2 in the ACC, North Carolina 9-0, and like I said, been just killing everyone since they played Kentucky.
I'll take Carolina in this game. We just saw Duke darn near lose in Cameron to Clemson. Who, sorry, I should have bleeped that out because we're not allowed to talk about Clemson anymore. We just saw Duke almost lose at home to some orange team in the ACC. Carolina is playing their best basketball. They're one of the 3 or 4 really dependable teams at the moment, even though they've even taken their lumps. So I'll take Carolina. I think they're playing well right now.
Yeah, I'm going Carolina. I think they're much better than Duke right now, much more complete. They have more things figured out too. It's funny that we've seen like the star be passed. Like it started Armando Bacot a couple years ago. Now it's RJ Davis. I'm going North Carolina to win this game. I think if I'm not picking Kentucky to win the national championship, I'm picking North Carolina. I'm that high on them this year. And I also think RJ Davis, All-American, not going to win Player of the Year because Zach Edey's there. RJ Davis, All-American. I would say Antonio Reeves, All-American. Dalton Connect, All-American. Just get it out of the way right now. But he does deserve it, and I think North Carolina can get the win. Iowa State at Baylor. As mentioned, Baylor had a loss last week. Iowa State, some big Hilton magic this past week. Let's see if they can do it on the road, Greg.
I'm going to take Baylor. This is just another gut. I know we just talked about how Iowa State's finally said that they're worth paying attention to, and yes, of course, they were ranked in the top 25 this week. But I am still just more confident in Baylor at this point, even though they just lost to TCU.
I'm more confident in Iowa State. I still just don't like that Baylor defense. I get there at home. That's huge. But Greg, they built an arena with 7,500 fans. Come on, that's not a home field advantage, not a home court advantage. Let's get some fans in there. That's crazy. So I'm going to penalize them for not having more fans in their stadium, for not having a good camera angle in their stadium. I'm going Iowa State. Next one up, we have Tennessee at Kentucky, one of the most anticipated games in the SEC all year. This one is going to be at Rupp Arena. We'll see if it's as loud as it has been when Big Z hit his 4-3 of the game that we thought was a 4-3 of the game. But this one could end up being the thing that decides the SEC, even though these teams do play another time.
This game, I wish I didn't. This is the one that I wish I didn't have to pick gut reaction to, because just I would have, delved into this and that, but just gut reaction is Tennessee. It's got nothing to do with Kentucky. I mean, this has got to be one of the early candidates for anticipated game of the year. Sure, of course, we may get it the game itself may not be, but matchup on paper going into it as it is right now, this matchup has got to be one of the ones that I'm just like, man, I am watching every second of this game.
Mm-hmm. Definitely one to watch on Saturday night. I'm going Kentucky in this one. They're at home. I do think the losing to South Carolina is not as big of a concern as maybe like people think, because you lost on the road. They do have Rob Dillingham missed the game against Arkansas with an illness. I think maybe he'll be back by this time next week. They do need to figure out the rotation. The defense has been sloppy. But I do think with Tennessee, it's not as much about guarding the whole team. It is finding a way to slow down Dalton Knecht. I think they'll figure out how to slow him down enough to get the win at home. When they play at Tennessee in the last game of the year, I will probably pick flip. I'll probably pick Tennessee at home court advantage too. I think these teams are similar. I think a neutral court, I think they'd be a coin flip game. So going Kentucky here. Now there is a big game on Sunday. This is one to remember because we haven't had as many huge games on Sunday quite yet, but that will pick up as the NFL season is coming to a close. We have Purdue and Wisconsin. These two teams at the top of the Big Ten. This one's at Wisconsin. Greg, who are you going with?
Again, gut reaction going Wisconsin, and it's difficult to pick against Purdue, but Wisconsin at home, I think they're playing some good ball right now. I know it's hard to pick against Zach Edey, and Purdue's one of the more dependable teams, and not more than 45 minutes ago I said, Purdue, Kentucky, Carolina are the three most dependable teams, but this year is still what it is, so I'll pick Wisconsin.
I'm going Wisconsin too. Mentioned that I like them a lot. They still have Connor Segan, who's like the ninth man off the bench. That even Greg Gard said in an interview, he was a bigger role for us last year. Just things have changed. We have freshmen who came in who are playing well, and we have AJ Storr, who had 28 points last week in one of the games. So I like the makeup of this team. I think they could be a team to watch out for to go deep in March. I think they can win the Big Ten. Purdue is a very good team as well. We just, sometimes when the guards have that pressure, we'll see if Wisconsin can turn that thing up and get them the win. So I'll go Wisconsin as well. All right, Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
Xavier's doing real well. The score is 86-48 with 5 minutes to go. So things are just going real well for our team that, if you remember, Joe, we said not more than a couple of weeks ago, we thought maybe they could sneak into the tournament. I think we have to agree. They're probably not a tournament team this year at this point. So, yeah.
No, I'm sad for Quincy Oliveri. He's had a great season and not going to be able to play in the NCAA tournament for Xavier this year. They're going to be 10-10 after this game. They'd have to go on a ridiculous run to get the tournament. I don't think it's going to happen. But it is encouraging for Xavier. You have Davion McKnight coming back for another year. Hypothetically, he has another year of eligibility. Probably going to come back for another year. You have found some freshmen in Trey Green and Dalen Swain. You have some international guys who have some more eligibility as well. And then you possibly get Zach Freeman and Jerome Hunter back. So if you add some recruits to it as well, this team next year could be a team that, hey, we took a step back this year. It kind of is understandable with what we lost up front with Hunter and Fremantle. So a tough season, but I think Sean Miller is getting more out of this team than you would think. You would just love to have, everyone says this on the resume, but you would just love to have those two quad 3 losses back against, Oakland and Delaware were the two quad 3 losses they had. So that's something that they definitely probably want to have back. But keeping a positive attitude for the future. My turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. It helps us as we go along. We'll be back next week to recap this crazy week of college basketball, preview the next week of crazy college basketball. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.